Buenos tardes. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I'm Linda Quan. I'm a physician at Seattle Children's Hospital, where I've taken care of a lot of drowning patients, children, and their families. And so that's why I'm here today, is because I decided it was too much. I wanted it to stop. So there's this old story that you've maybe heard before of all of these people floating down the river who have drowned, and someone at the bottom is pulling them out. And then one day he says, I'm going to go upstream to find out why this is happening. And so that's how I started, by going upstream and finding that drowning prevention is actually the most valuable thing I can do to save people, much more valuable than my taking care of them as a doctor. So I would like to thank you all for inviting me, and especially to Ana Ortiz, because she is the reason why I am in prevention. Because sitting in my desk at a computer doing research is not so interesting. It's not so exhilarating as being around creative, caring people like her. And I have learned so much from the people who, in English we say, are on the ground with a problem, who deal with it every day, who worry about it every day and do something in their lives to fix it. So thank you, and I wish I were in Montevideo with you. Well, let's make sure we're all talking about the same thing, because at least in English we use the word drowning, and we have been sloppy with how we use it. So what drowning is an experience, an event, and where someone's airway, that is their nose and mouth, gets below the liquid, usually water, and so they cannot breathe. The injury of drowning is very straightforward. It is due to lack of getting oxygen from the air that you would want to be breathing. It is not, drowning is not getting water in your lungs, getting water out of your lungs. That is not the problem. The problem is that the water has interrupted your ability to breathe. And so when we talk about drowning, that really should mean the event that happened. There is a drowning that's going on now on the beach. Go take care of it. Then there are two outcomes of drowning, and one is that a person lives or the person dies, that it is a non-fatal drowning or a fatal drowning. Both can be drownings. So be careful. When you hear people talk about drowning, what are they talking about? Are they talking about the event that happened, or are they talking about someone who died from it? We are sloppy, so be careful and ask them to be clear. Now, I wanted to know what's going on in Uruguay. How much drowning do you all see? What is the problem there? Unfortunately, very fortunately, the World Health Organization has just created and sent out a report on the global problem of drowning. It literally came out, this report, this month. And Uruguay was one of the countries that gave its statistics so that I could look at those and be a little bit informed about the problem that you deal with. So what this chart shows is who drowns in Uruguay by age. And so what you can see here is that very few children under a year of age drown in the 1 year of data that was sent. There were basically none that year. And for 1 to 4-year-olds, there were children who drowned. And these are rates. These are not numbers of children. These are the rates, the number of children divided by 100,000 population of that group. So that way, by giving you a rate, we can compare, as we will in the next slide, how is the drowning rate in Uruguay, which is a small population, compared to the drowning rates in Brazil, which is a much larger population. So you can see here, you have a problem that you probably knew about of young children drowning. And then, like we have seen in many other countries, certainly in the United States, the safest age is that of the child who's in school. And then it gets to be a real problem for the adolescent, the older adolescent, and the young adult. So 15 to 24-year-old. That is those are the age groups that have the highest risk. And now in my country, in addition to the child under age 5. Now, you can see that people continue to drown, of course, as they get older. And you would know a lot more about what they're doing. Is this occupational? Is this recreational? Is this transportation? All right, so I thought it would be very interesting to compare Uruguay to the drowning rates in Brazil and in Argentina, your neighbors. And so when I did that, I was surprised about some things. First of all, that the curve, if you will, of that graph is there's a little peak in the children under age 5, the preschoolers, and then it drops down, and then it gets big again for all of the countries involved, as we talked about, who in the age group of the older adolescent to young adult, and then it continues on. But what surprised me so much about this data from South America is that it's very different from the data from Asia. It's very different even from the data from the United States and from most other countries in the world, because in these other countries in the world, the biggest bump, the biggest peak in the graph is usually in the child under age 5. So drowning, in my mind, as a pediatrician, it's a pediatric condition, because in my experience, it primarily involved what I was seeing, the child under age 5. But that's not true in South America, and I wonder why that is. I must say that when we look at the drowning rates in the United States among certain groups of people, we do see that in the Hispanic group, we lump everybody, basically south of our border, into that group when we're looking at statistics in the United States. Forgive me. We find that that is true, that subgroup of people in the United States do not have the high drowning rates in that preschool age child. So I wonder why that is, and I want you to be telling me this after. Now, I think the other important way to look at drownings and who's at risk, and we need to know this information, because if we're going to do prevention, we have to figure out to whom are we going to focus our efforts? Where are we going to focus our efforts? What are these people doing so that we know how to be specific in helping them and helping the situation? So this is why all this data is necessary. So I could not find any information. I didn't try very hard. But again, I would appreciate your giving your impression of what you think is the site, the kind of water, bodies of water, where people in Uruguay drown. So I'm showing you here the situation for the United States. So these are for drowning deaths where people drowned and died. So you can see the blue, almost half were in open water, natural water, rivers, lakes, the ocean. But that also should include the group in red that drowned in boats, because they're obviously also in those natural waters. So you can see the majority of drowning deaths in the United States is in open water, natural waters. And I would guess that that's really true here in Uruguay, because you have so much water. You have your large river systems. You have your extensive coastline that's so beautiful and inviting. So the way this pie is cut up would, I think, look probably even, show even more so that you have natural water. Open water is where you would need to focus your drowning prevention energies. You can see pools are in here. I'm sorry, the pools are in red. The pools represent a very big chunk in the United States. And these are swimming pools, and they're mostly private swimming pools. And in the United States, we have a problem, along with Australia and New Zealand, of having an economy that makes it possible for people to have private swimming pools, and they put them in their backyard, and then their children drown there. And so we have created this particular risk that's not natural, that's not, shouldn't have been in the environment, but we have created this environmental risk, and we have done very little to fix it. But I'll show you that it is fixable. All right, this is the last of my data slides, so please bear with me. I think it's important to understand, too, as you will tell me, but wait a minute, it's not so simple of you just go to the lakes and focus on that. Because who is at your lakes or rivers and oceans and drowning can be different groups of people. It's going to be perhaps the young child, that under 5-year-old, who is falling into the river or the lake. You don't have pools, perhaps, for them to fall into. Maybe you do, but at least in the open water setting, there's that group of people who fall in, and young children. And what you do for prevention for those people is obviously very different from what you're going to do for the adolescent who's just diving in and swimming or trying to swim or thinks he can swim. So what this is showing you is that, in fact, for the child in the United States, the young child under age 5, 1 to 4 years, in yellow there, you can see the great majority, the peak for them of risk is going to be in the swimming pools. Whereas the natural waters, the open waters, are involving really all the age groups after that, and the great majority of people. And that is certainly true throughout the world. All right, so everybody has been to a water setting in this room. Many of you are lifeguards. Many of you have seen things you don't like happening. Many of you worry. What are you going to do to prevent this drowning? So I've given you a picture of this probably early adolescent male, and he's doing something that you might not think is a good idea. What can we do, what can Uruguay do to prevent this from happening, a drowning from happening? So what I want you to notice is the gender here, the sex. Because I think if I asked every one of you in this room who's more likely to drown, a male or a female, I didn't show you a graph of that. I felt like I didn't need to show you the graph of that because you know that, right? And this is the sad case that males from the age of 1 year of age up have a greater risk of drowning compared to females. The ratio of drowning in males to females is 3 to 1. When you get to the adolescent age groups, it's even bigger, 6 to 1. So males' risk increase as they hit that adolescent age. And in the injury prevention world, we call this the age of testosterone poisoning. Well, what we want to do is think about this approach, your approach to drowning prevention, Uruguay's approach, your swim club, your organization's approach to drowning. I want you to become injury prevention specialists from this talk. And so I'm going to tell you about Dr. William Hayden. Dr. Hayden was an engineer, and he was involved with cars. And he became the first person to head up or led to the development of the United States National Highway Transportation Safety Agency. It's the first and unfortunately almost the only organization in the United States that focuses on injury prevention. Now, Dr. Hayden was a very organized man. So if I asked you to say, okay, tell me, what do you want to do to fix drownings in your organization? What do you want to focus on? You'll say, well, I could do this or I could do that. And, you know, of course, you would have your own ideas based on your own experience. Well, Dr. Hayden's job was now to look at the whole problem in the United States and think about this. And what he did is he gave us a way of organizing our thoughts. So I'm sorry, I would have liked, I should have put a picture of a car, because he started with cars. And he said, when you are thinking about preventing injury from something, you have to think about it in several ways. You think of the victim, the person who is going to get injured. What can you do to modify that person, make him safer, protect him? Then you think about the injurious agent. Well, for him, it was the car. He was thinking, what can I do to cars to make them safer? For us, it's a little harder. It's a lot harder. We have to think about how can we make water safer. And then he said, so you have a person, you have them in this potential dangerous agent or of water or in a car, and they're moving, and then they're in an environment, they're in a setting. So there's something that can be done perhaps in the setting around this potential situation, this potential injury, to stop it there or to modify it. Then he also said, we can do this. We can think about the victim, the car, the water in our case, and the environment in 3 different stages of this injury. Before the injury ever happens, before you ever get to the beach, before you build the pool in your backyard. We can think of then how we can change each of these things when the drowning event happens. What can we do for the victim or could be done by the victim? What can we do to the water when that happens? What in the environment would help stop the injury of drowning? And then to think also after the drowning has happened. Now, for you lifeguards, you've rescued the person and you've pulled them up on the shore. They're no longer drowning. What can you do? What can be done for the victim? What do you need in your environment to help the victim? Okay, so I want you to be thinking about each of these categories. I want you to be thinking what you're going to put in each of these boxes. So we're going to go through this. All right, the pre-event, you are saying, Anna's saying, wait a minute, whoa, 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 of course we can teach him swim skills so that when he jumps into that water off of that bridge, he will know how to swim. He will know how to hit the water, come up, and make it to the shore. Someone who is a lifeguard will say in here, we can control his behavior. I will say to him, stop. You can't go jump off the bridge. You can't jump into the water from that place where you are. What we might be able to do to make the water safer is there is a possibility. We could provide him a safe place to swim, a safe place for him to jump into the water and get the thrill, get the fun, get the excitement, but where we know what's underneath that water, where we know it's deep enough, where we know there's nothing under that will harm him. So in our community in Seattle, we're working with communities to build safer sites for people to go to provide alternatives. And then, of course, in the environment, it's what so many of you do, is we should have around this boy lifeguards. And it would have been even ideal to have his father or mother there saying, no way are you going to jump off that bridge. No. All right, so now we've gone past that. Those things have all failed. He never took the swim classes or finished them or reached adequate skills in honest classes. He's chosen this site because it's near his house. He didn't have transportation to go to the safer place or money to go to the pool, and there are no lifeguards there. So when the event happens and he's drowning now, all you can do is hope that, well, maybe in honest class, he did learn some survival skills. Maybe he didn't get to the point that he could swim 100 meters, but maybe he can remember to float. Maybe he can remember to tread water. And if you are a lifeguard who's in that area and you see this person drowning, you would want to have in your environment something you could throw him, some rescue materials, and certainly even more than that to help you do that. And then once you have rescued him, gotten him out, somebody needs to know CPR. Someone needs to call for help. You certainly probably are hoping that that there are other people in the area who can help you take care of him, and you could call 911. For us, 911, the emergency medical services. All right, so Anna's probably very upset, or maybe she's not, because Anna's very cool. But what we want you to notice is we didn't talk a whole lot about educating. And I want you to think about that. This boy is entering this age group up here at the top of the slide. Very testosterone poisoned. Huh? Very difficult to deal with, perhaps. Hard to teach, but still teachable. And then we have this other group. These are the two age groups that are most at risk for drowning, we said, in our societies. And this age group are really, do you see similarities? Ah, yes. This age group, the young child, also doesn't listen very well, also wanders and goes off on their own, also doesn't have all the skills they need. And also, can you teach this child at this age to do what's necessary? Maybe. Would you rely on it? Not really. What about the adolescent? Can we take away the testosterone poisoning? I think we've all, in injury prevention, seen lots of times when was very smart children, teenagers, very capable, never got in any trouble, never had risk-taking behaviors, still can get into trouble because their mind is developing just like this young preschool age child's brain is developing, so that there's only so much you can do. So we have to think about things other than totally focusing on the victim. That's all I want to say about that. All right, now I wanted to bring up one very interesting point for me, and that is within Uruguay you have different populations, I'm sure. You have people who are of different groups, no doubt, people who perhaps are different cultures. And what I want to know from you is, do you think that they are all equally water safe or equally at risk for water problems, for drowning? And so what we have seen in the United States and what has been seen in the Netherlands, has been seen in Australia, is that there are different risks among different peoples who live in that country. So in the United States, those Americans who are black have a much greater risk of drowning than those who are white and those who are Hispanic. I didn't include on this the indigenous peoples, the American Indians, the Native Americans, because they have an even higher risk than the blacks. So there is something different about different groups. So what other studies have gone on to show is that the drowning risk really is so much a function of how you grew up around water. We need better studies to actually really pin down that. What is it? But this study is probably one of the most important because this researcher interviewed the various minority groups in inner cities in the United States, and they asked them, were they able to swim? And what you see here is that there are marked differences in swimming ability. And what they have gone on to do is to find out that especially amongst blacks, there in America, there is a fear of the water, so they avoid the water. But then their children go to the water with their friends, and then they have a higher rate of drowning because they have had no experience. So I ask this question to you in Uruguay. Who are your at-risk cultural groups? Because drowning, in my mind, is a cultural problem. Okay, so what we've done, we've gone over all of this stuff about the data that shows us who is at risk, where we should focus our attention to prevent drownings. We should focus on certain age groups, preventing drownings in the children under 5 years of age, those who are older adolescents and young adults, males. We should focus on the minorities. We should focus on, we know I didn't show the data, but people who have seizure disorders have a much higher risk of drowning death. We should focus on the use of alcohol and making people understand it is very dangerous, in fact, more dangerous, if you will, to swim and drink alcohol than to drive and drink alcohol. And in the United States, we've been making some success with changing the culture around the use of alcohol while driving cars, but we have not begun to really do a good job with that in boating. And at least in the United States, boating means you take your alcohol. And that when the other factor that we know is a risk factor is that those who are not wearing their life jackets in a boat are at higher risk, and those who have not had swimming lessons. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do this now. I want you to focus. What are you going to teach? What is the message you want to do? And so I put together a group of international experts that I met at a meeting in Portugal, and we said, okay, let's all get together, sit down, make some decisions. What's really important in drowning prevention? What do we really want families or people who are going to the water to be aware of, to know? And so what are the messages we want to our organizations, our countries, International Life-Saving Federation, everybody, to give to these people? So we sat down and we made a list. 130 things came up. Whoa, it's too many. So we said, okay, prioritize it. You get to vote. And everybody from representatives from 18 countries were on this group, this committee, and we cut it down. Oh, still too many. Okay, you vote again, making hard choices, very difficult choices. Okay, still too many. Finally, we came up with 8 messages for the person who is going to take care of themselves. Take care of yourself is our message. And so these are the messages we came up with. Learn to swim and to learn water survival skills. While we go through these, I want you to be thinking, which of these are scientifically proven to be good advice? Which of these recommendations has science behind it that supports my spending my time, my energy, my few resources on promoting this idea? Because it works. Okay, the second one was never swim alone. Obey warning signs and flags. Never swim after having drunk alcohol. Learn when and how to use life jackets. Swim in areas where there are lifeguards. Pay attention to the water conditions and the weather conditions. And always check that, enter the water feet first in water that isn't deep or is unknown to you. So which of these do you think? You get to pick 3. Which of these is based on science, on evidence, that will be helpful, that they are helpful? All right, I have put here in red the ones that have data to show that they work. All right, we're going to come back to them and go through each of those actually. Okay, then we put together another list, the second list with 8. Again, what's the advice we should be giving people who are taking care of others? And so again, teach especially children to swim and to have water safety skills. Swim where there are lifeguards. Establish rules before you go in the water, safety rules. Pay constant attention to children and those that you are supervising, whether they're in the water or near the water. Learn when and how to use the life jackets, especially for children and for inexperienced swimmers. Learn CPR. Learn how to rescue others safely without putting yourself in danger. And obey, again, the warning signs and warning flags. Now, which of these have data? And so you can see it's very interesting. Only half the time these recommendations, only half of our recommendations have data. So we need more research is the answer. It's not that these should be disregarded, but if I'm going to focus my energies and convince my government to do something, or my institution, whatever, I will have probably better traction, as we say, ability to convince people if I say, this has been proven to be effective. Okay. So to help remember these 5 things that have come up recurrently in these 2 lists, we put together this set of icons for the circle of drowning prevention. Think of that boy being in the middle of that circle who was jumping off the bridge. He needed to have supervision. It works. He needed to have perhaps a barrier that would have kept him off of that bridge. He needed to know how to swim. He needed perhaps to wear a life jacket so that he would float when he went under the water. And he needed to be in a place where there is a lifeguard. And each of these icons represents interventions, strategies that have been shown to be effective to prevent drowning. Okay, let's go through each of them. I'll start with lifeguards because that's what so many of you in this room do. And we believe we know what you do to prevent drownings. You control risky behaviors. You prevent a drowning from ever happening by that. Once a drowning's happening, you have been trained, hopefully, to recognize a drowning that's in progress, which it turns out is actually very hard to do. And then once you recognize it, you know how to rescue somebody safely. And then once you have gotten them to a safe situation, you can start CPR. What is the proof? We have not the best studies, not the best quality of science, but we know only this information, that from some very large lifeguarding organizations like the United States Life-Saving Association, they have only one death for every 18 million visitors on their beaches that are lifeguarded. Similarly, we've seen that in Seattle for almost 10 million visitors in Seattle at our beaches that are not surf, but are lakes and some rivers that we have had really no deaths in 12 years with 10 million visitors. It's not ideal information. But what I want you to do is to think about, okay, so we're going to embrace lifeguarding as an intervention, a strategy. And you're saying, oh gosh, I already know this. What do you think I do with my life, right? Well, I want you to think about what you do. And so many of us in drowning prevention focus on education, but also think about technology. We also need to think about policy and laws. And then with the policy and laws, there needs to be enforcement. And so what do I mean by that? These are the 3 areas that you need to focus your energies on for each of these interventions, these 5 things that work. So for instance, if we go back again to Dr. Hayden's matrix with the victim, the water, the environment, for lifeguards, what can you do about education and skills? We can increase your abilities, your skills. What do you need to work on? We can improve the technology that can help you. Equipment. If you're on a river, you probably need a boat or personal watercraft, the jet ski, to get to people. You certainly need your rescue tubes or what equivalent you use. And you also need policies. You also need rules. And so I am very aware of that because I live in a state that has run out of money. And so we have not had lifeguards at our state parks for many years. And we have seen the number of drowning deaths go up at these parks. And so we need laws that can guarantee we're going to have lifeguards there. Otherwise, lifeguarding's just not, is a whole tool that we can use for drowning prevention that we can't use. All right, so I want you to be thinking about which of these pieces of lifeguarding improvements are needed where you work or where you visit. And these ideas came out of a group of quite a few organizations in the United States, USLA, the YMCA, the American Red Cross, academics like me, to sit down and go over the science and say, what do we know about lifeguarding that we can improve it? And so these are what we came up with, is that we really need to continue to improve how frequently, just how lifeguards can recognize a drowning is in progress. The people in Australia, the lifeguarding people in Australia have worked on this a lot. We also need to train in open water. Perhaps you already do this here in Uruguay, that you train your lifeguards who are going to be in open water. But many times in the United States, our lifeguards are trained in a pool, just like we teach children to swim in a pool, and then we let them out and where they go and drown in open water. So another piece of information that was supported by study showed that if your management, lifeguard supervisor, is more present and watches over things more than just sending the lifeguards out, go do your job, call me if you have any problems. No. That if they're more involved, more present, that the lifeguards perform better and do reviews. And so we know there are just whole areas that need to be studied around lifeguarding, because this is a very important area. We need to know how long you should be on duty, because attention dwindles after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, by half an hour. Attention is very difficult to maintain for a lifeguard who's watching so many things for an event that is very rare. All right, so we need more study. Of course, a researcher will say that, right? Okay. Now, supervision. I am embarrassed as a pediatrician to talk to you about this, because you would think, the pediatrician should know how to tell parents how to supervise. I should be able to tell a parent, this is how you do this, just like this is what formula, or this is what food you give, or this is what shots you need. This is what's really going to save your life, is I should be able to teach you how to watch your child so they're safe around water. But I don't, because we haven't really talked about this enough, figured this out. So we have said that with a child who's very young, who doesn't know how to swim, the parent should be close, not sitting up there on the beach, close within an arm's reach. And they should be paying close attention to the child. That means no distractions, no cell phone, no conversation with the neighbor there, or too many children, overwhelmed. Focusing on the child who's near the water, by the water. And that supervisor, that parent, or someone from the school who's watching, or someone from the camp who's watching, should not be using drugs or alcohol. They need to be on. And we also know that they should have capacity. They should be able to do something to respond. Now, I'm a senior citizen, so I know my attention isn't so good anymore, but I certainly don't want my 90-year-old father watching my grandchild at the beach, or in the water, or even in the bathtub, because he's too slow. He doesn't know how to respond, and he probably doesn't know how to, and I know he doesn't know how to swim. So we need to understand, we need to be giving better instruction to families. We need to be talking also about supervising adolescents. You're going to the beach today with the friends, huh? Okay, great. What are you going to do? Oh, great, of course. You're not taking any alcohol, are you? No. And you're going to go on the boat? Great. Here's the life jacket. You're going to take that and wear that there. And who's with you? Who's the adult? Oh, well, then I'll go. Or if you can promise me you do all these things and you're going to this safe place, then just check in. Call me. Okay, this is an area now of swimming pools where I tell you that many of the high-income countries that have warm environments and their swimming pools, residential swimming pools, are killing their children. And so that is the home swimming pool, and we are, it's very clear the child at risk is the child who lives in the house, because most communities have laws that require the fence to protect the child who is the neighbor, but they do not require that the fence goes all the way around the house so that the child who lives in the house can still enter the pool, and that's how they die. So we have very good data from Australia especially to fence the pools well with four-sided fencing, fencing that goes all around, and that it has a gate that closes automatically, shuts automatically, latches automatically. And we know that when communities have put these laws in place requiring this four-sided fencing of a home swimming pool, that their drowning deaths are cut in half. They have 50% fewer deaths. But we need these laws. And then we also need them to be enforced. We know that they could have done better than 50%, or the 50% falls down when nobody's going out there and saying, good morning, I'm your inspector, and I'm here to see your pool and your fence. Is your gate working? Let me go check. So we need that. And in the United States, we need a national rule because we're just killing too many of our children. All right, life jackets. These have to be approved life jackets. And be careful, because now there are many companies that are selling life jackets on the market that are not approved. And it's confusing to parents, and it's putting their children at risk. And the other point is that a life jacket does no good unless you wear it. You must wear it. And so people in boats maybe think they're being smart by having a life jacket in the boat, but when that boat capsizes, when they fall overboard, they are not able, often, usually, to put in a life put it on. And so we have not read really good reports, any good reports of people who have been able to save themselves by putting on the life jacket in the water. We know that if they are wearing a life jacket in a boat, that their risk for dying is 50%. And there is one study that's shown that if you put children in a life jacket who are playing, these young children we're talking about now, right, around the water, that their risk for drowning is also less. So life jackets need to be considered for use as a piece of technology. Remember, we talked about education, but also technology. This is a cheap piece of technology, and it can be used for in the boat, as it has been traditionally, but it can be used for children by the water and even adults by the water. So in many countries, these men who are fishing and surf, or even just by the side of a river, fall in and drown. This has been a big problem in Australia, big problem in New Zealand, and they have addressed it by trying to get these guys to wear life jackets. And you can even learn to swim with a life jacket. So when we put the life jacket into our Hayden matrix, we can see the education pieces. We need to tell people, hey, wear one. It will save your life. We need technology that's going to make them cooler, make them cheaper, make them stylish so nobody's embarrassed wearing them. And we need to protect the victim also by having rules that say, policies that say when you go to your swim club, it's okay to wear your life jacket in the pool. Because sometimes swimming pools say, no, you can't wear them in the pool. But you need to be changing the culture around their use. All right, so one of the things to make them more accessible to people is we have set up life jacket loaner kiosks, sites where you go to a beach and there is a set of life jackets you see here on your left that are there for free to borrow, and you are told to choose the right size, to buckle it all up, and to make sure it's snug, fits you, and to wear it. And then you return it when you're done. All right, swimming lessons. This is what Anna has been waiting for all this time, to hear about the effect of swimming lessons. And there are a few studies that have shown that young children under age 5 who have had swimming lessons have a 50% less risk or more of having a drowning death. So that we need to have more, especially perhaps young children, and certainly everybody learning to swim. And so I want you to think about what do you teach when you teach to swim. And this is why I am here, is because Anna presented what she is doing with her program that was so creative, so wonderful. Because in the United States, swimming lessons have been primarily so you could swim laps. So maybe you could become Michael Phelps. But that's not what we want to be teaching. We don't want everybody to become Michael Phelps. We want them to have the skills to be safe. And what are those skills? So in the American Red Cross committee that I'm on, we sat down and we said, okay, what are the minimum skills that you need to have to be safe? And so we listed them, and we know their absolute minimum. Being able to enter the water with total immersion, being able to get back to the surface, be able to turn around in the water so that you can get to where you need to get out, be able to move yourself anyhow, any way, so that you can move at least 25 meters, 25 yards, and then that you know how to get out of the water. But that we realize that all of these abilities can be very different. These skills may be very different and difficult in different kinds of water. And that's where Anna's doing such an incredible job, teaching these skills in different water. We don't know what's good water competency. And I think that many of you in here would say, wait a minute, but you forgot this, and you forgot teaching them judgment, and you forgot that. And you're right, we did. And that needs to be built on. Okay, so water competency is again about education through swimming lessons, and perhaps just to think, do you require swimming lessons or swimming competency or water, anything for graduation from schools? Do you require it for anything in your country? We don't, and it's a problem. And then the interesting thing, of course, the technology that you need to have in order to do this is to have pools, and we're going to get to that. Okay, I want to talk about policy now in the last few minutes, because you think, oh, all I have to do is take care of the people in front of me. Well, that's absolutely right. All I have to do is take care of my family. Absolutely right. But you also can help take care of your community. And you do that by changing the culture around things. You do it by changing policies and laws. It doesn't have to all be laws. Simple things can just change how people think and how they behave. That's the most important thing. All right, so I'm going to show you that there are places that have really worked on providing swimming and water competency. These are policies that have worked and decreased drowning deaths enormously. There are areas in various countries we've talked about that require swimming pools have four-sided fencing. There are now countries or regions in countries that require boaters wear their life jackets. And there is, in my country, in the United States, it is not allowed to boat when drunk. All 50 states, amazingly enough, agreed to this. And we are working towards enforcing it so that people take it more seriously. And then you can even do more things with policy. You can close areas that are safe, not safe. So for instance, we closed some waters in our state during our flood season because we have high mountains with glaciers and snow-covered mountains. So in the spring, the water down these rivers is very cold and very fast. People don't understand that. They go in because, oh, finally, it's a sunny day after 4 months of rain in Seattle, and then they drown. So we have actually closed some parts of certain rivers to people for that time period. All right, there are many, many pieces to drowning prevention, but what I want to show you is 2 star situations, 2 countries that have taken it into their mindset, their political will to address drowning as a problem. Uruguay, are you ready to do that? we can all work on little pieces of it, even if we don't have the total governmental commitment and funding to do it. So Vietnam 10 years ago said, injury is what is killing our people. It is not infectious disease. That was a surprise to me. But that's certainly true in my country. Many more people die of injury than die of birth defects, infections. Everybody's running around talking about you know what now. But the number of people who have died of infections in our country is very small compared to the number who are in motor vehicle accidents, drowning, etc., etc. Okay, Vietnam said, we're going to start teaching swimming to our children. Well, they didn't have pools at all their schools. Who does? So they had this idea, let's use portable pools. So they have these portable pools they'll take to a school and have it there with swimming lessons for a while, then they pick it up, move it to another school. It's brilliant. They have put life jacket loaner programs at the beaches, and they have worked on standards for their life jackets on ferries. Bangladesh is another example that's astounding what they did. And this did not come from the government, but came from organizations and is highly supported by the Australian government, where they said, we are going to address the home, not just the child, not just the family, the whole home, and to make it safer, because Bangladesh, as you know, gets 3/4 of the country is covered in water every year. And so they did education, working with the parents to increase their awareness about drowning and what they could do. They removed the water, if you will. Remember, we kept saying, how do we make water safer? Well, you can remove it. That's what the barrier does, right? So they put covers on their big water vessels that they use to collect water, or that they use for cooking or water or for washing water. They put barriers around the water hazards near their home, and they provided safety pens, which in the United States we call cribs, for the young children, so they couldn't just wander around and fall into the water. They also worked at an even bigger level, the community. So they got the whole community aware that drowning is something they could work on. They provided a daycare so that these children had supervision. They eliminated hazards around, they covered the wells, they created pathways so that their children could be safer going to work or play or school, and it would help their dads out. And they evaluated every drowning accident. So what I am saying is that I want you to think of drowning prevention as multiple pieces you can work on. Not just one, but pick one that makes sense for you. And that it also, think of it as the prevention needs to happen not only just for the person, but it needs to happen at the family level, the community level, the nation level, and actually now we're working at it globally. And so that's how we will make changes, by sharing and working together, just as you all have done today with this conference. And it's really been an honor to be able to be part of that. So thank you very much. Muchas gracias.